By Jetaway, an ecological waste management company that believes the cultivation of the mind is the best resource for recycling.
To demonstrate our total commitment to put the safety and the education of our children ahead of politicians and other political officers who make school children the innocent pawns of a nebulous state law.
Since 1975, when the court ordered desegregation, there has been a constant struggle to racially balance the schools and bring a sound education into the classroom. Many parents are concerned about the quality of classroom teaching.
Boston teachers need to be tested and certified to make sure that our children are not being taught by just college graduates who are not trained in certain subjects. I think the whole curriculum needs to be reevaluated, not only just in Boston. I think it's a national problem in America, why our children are failing. And I think the whole educational theory is how we teach our children to read, how we teach them, how we give them a foundation needs to be re-examined by the Boston school system and nationally.
What we need teachers that are going to care. We need an administration that cares. I think we need to take the politics out of education.
I would make all the schools a quality school and have equity throughout the whole system. And I would not try to come up with a new assignment plan thinking that that's going to change the educational level of the Boston public school system, because that's not going to do it. And Mayor Flynn knows that.
The mayor's plan, drafted by outside consultants, was reviewed by the school committee in December. Superintendent LeVal Wilson.
I think what you heard tonight was biracial support for the plan, but you also heard some concerns being addressed and raised by several members of the school committee that are black. And I think the entire committee and the superintendent and the staff have to be responsive to those concerns to see if we cannot resolve some of those issues by the time I come back with recommendations. And I'm confident we can do that.
On January 26th, Boston Public School Superintendent LeVal Wilson offered his recommendations on the proposed controlled choice student assignment plan. Now, the plan has been the subject of a major controversy since its introduction by the city late last year, amidst continued charges that the plan does not address the demands for both quality education and racial equity. The school committee has now charged the city and the superintendent to consolidate their recommendations into one plan, which brings us to tonight and the question, will such a plan ultimately benefit our children? Joining me to help clarify the issues for you and the community residents here in our studio audience tonight are Boston School Superintendent LeVal Wilson, school committee members Juanita Wade, Jean McGuire, and the co-authors of the city's controlled choice assignment plan, Michael Alves and Dr. Charles Willey. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Say Brother. Thanks for coming in tonight. My first question, of course, is to you two gentlemen. You drew up the first plan, co-authors of the plan, joined at the pen, so to speak, so I'll give the question to both of you. What will this plan achieve that wasn't done in '75?
I'll make my first try at it. I think this plan provides equity for the first time for all children. We have designed 3 zones, and each of the zones has about 13,000, 14,000 children in it. There are about 20 schools that parents and their children can choose, and that school does not belong to any neighborhood, which means that all schools now belong to all of the people.
Now, let me stop you there. You say equity for all students across the city, but some people charge that in some zones, particularly, suppose in the East Zone, where some of the schools are bad, it's not going to provide them the wide choices that are available in some of the other two zones? How do you answer that?
Well, Michael Al is my colleague who works with me, has examined those schools, and I'll ask him to pick up that question.
What's up?
Well, again, as Dr. Lee said, our plan is designed to empower parents who historically have never been empowered, and also...
But say, let me stop you. Let me go back to the question. Say, for example, I live in Dorchester. I want to go to a school in Dorchester, and that's a zone that largely has bad schools. It's a disinvested area. I am only restricted to those choices in Dorchester. Am I getting equity? I'm not able to go to the north. I'm not able to go to the west. Does that provide complete equity for me?
Well, again, under the court-ordered plan, they divided the city into 8 districts. So there was rampant inequity in those 8 districts.
But at that point, I could go anywhere across the city. Now I'm only stuck in...
No, not true. You have to go to the school that your geo code assigned you to. I don't know where that information has come from in the city. It is misinformation that people had choice. There were magnet schools under the court-ordered plan, and if you couldn't get into a magnet school, you had to go to a school that they assigned you to.
Let me bring it back around.
But in our plan, you got 20 schools you can go to.
20 schools in each
zone. And not only that, let me make this point, because the public hasn't heard this point. We are not dividing a plan for the past. The past was the court-ordered plan. We have designed a plan for the future. And that means that if a school in your zone is not good, the school department, the city, the whole community is obligated to make that school good, and we know it's bad because students do not choose it. Now, in the past, when you didn't choose a school, a bad school still had students who had to go to it. So I want to make that point because I think a lot of misinformation has been given about the plan. Now, let me make the Dorchester issue.
Quickly now.
I'm going to make it very quickly. In the East Zone, our plan says that all 3 zones must be made equivalent. The mayor, the school committee, the school superintendent know which zone in which to invest the money that we have if the East Zone is not up to par. That's where the money goes. It doesn't go to the West Zone. It doesn't go to the North Zone.
Just talked about the school committee. We have 2 school committee members here, Jim McGuire and Juanita Wade. What do you think?
Oh, I think that both gentlemen make a very good point, that the geocoded plan as it stands now does limit parents' choice. And the issue of program quality has not been addressed over the last 14 years. And the plan has been devised by the consultants, does open the door for opportunity for that to happen. Zone planning councils, parent information centers, so the opportunities for school improvement are there. The limitation, let's talk about the limitation. The limitation is that if the plan is implemented right now as it stands, parents have to wait to begin to look at improvement plans. My concern is, before you start assigning people, you've got to give them an understanding of what they have in the school now, but also some hope for what is to come, so that when they make choices, they're making real choices. For instance, if a school that I know parents choose not to go to right now is still on the list, and it'll still be one of the schools they get to choose, and if they don't get into the other 19 schools, they may even end up in that school, what hope do they have that that school will get any better than it is now, not 3 and 4 and 5 years down the road, but right now?
Okay, let's turn to the man at the head of all this situation, Dr. Wilson. You proposed a second plan with some changed recommendations. With what you've seen from the original plan and your plan in place, what do you see, how is this going to achieve quality education? Because this is the nut of the whole argument. How are kids going to be able to be sent on to other colleges and be sent on in life with a quality education?
Well, I think there are 2 issues. One, we most certainly have to improve education in the city of Boston. Quality education is the issue,
how do we do
not busing kids. We've outlined a number of reforms in our Boston Ed plan, so we want to couple that with the whole notion of reform. Now, let me just say that the consultants, I think, have done a good job of trying to bring about a consensus. What I'm suggesting is some modifications of their boundary lines. Parents, school committee members, have said that the East Zone does not have as many quality schools as the West Zone and North Zone. I'd like to bring my map up on the screen if I could, just to show some differences.
Quickly. You did, and we'll show the difference between your, I guess it's the 2 options in your plan.
I have 2 options because there are some real concerns raised by parents and by members of the community and our school committee. There are schools in the East Zone that people say are not the same quality as the West or the North. In addition, it's been suggested that the Mattapan area has been split up when many other communities have not.
Describe for me what you...
Now, what you see at this particular point in the red is the consultant's plan, and then you see the two variations that I have proposed. One that encompasses the just the Mattapan area, and one that goes all the way down into High Park and takes in High Park. Mattapan brings it to the East Zone.
Okay.
Now, that adds some additional quality schools to the East Zone, and I am recommending the one that incorporates High Park and Mattapan.
Let me stop you here because I'm having a tough time. In your plan, you're talking about adding quality schools, but on the same hand, you're talking about closing schools like Brighton, Umana, Boston Latin Academy. Some of these schools who have achieved higher academic ratings in the past few years and are doing very well. You're closing down the schools, but yet saying that this is going to help achieve quality education.
So we're talking about two different types of schools. The consultants focused on elementary and middle schools. The map that you just saw focused on adding more elementary and middle schools to the East Zone, trying to address the issue of perceived quality. The consultants did not focus on high schools. I have focused on high schools as well. The present assignment program assigns young people in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. We have over 43 vacant seats at the high school level. We can't afford to continue to pay for all that extra space.
Let me suggest this, and Gene, I want you to try. Gene, I want you to throw in, if you can, here, because I know you're sitting over there making faces and may have trouble with this. But when you're talking about closing down schools because the students aren't going to the school, is it because the students aren't just there, or is it due to the horrendous dropout rate, almost 50%?
No, we have 4,300 more seats available, than we need. We could use 4,300 more students at the high school level. We're not going to get those students. So we need to reduce the 17 high schools we have down to a smaller number, use that money to improve the quality of programs.
Okay, Gene, any response to this?
I think what we're offering people in a city like Boston, which has a 1 or 2% vacancy rate, the opportunity to have a choice to find a good apartment. If your income is limited, as the income to run the schools is limited, and you tell somebody who's earning anywhere from 11 to 20,000, has 4 or 5 kids, you've got a choice now. Go get an apartment. The reality is you're not going to get an apartment. You're going to be one of the homeless. If I translate that to the schools, then the words that are part of the current lexicon of what I call reaction, a counter to Brown versus the Board of Education, is somehow choice all the way from vouchers and money from the public
Gene,
for private schools
bring us to the meaning.
Goes to the public sector with people making a choice which is not there. Chuck said something which, if all things were equal in power, that we're planning for the future. But for people who have been involved in the 14th Amendment guarantees to equal access, the past is prologue. And unless we see that investment in the infrastructure of education before we make the choice, what is a bad school? Is it a school that hasn't had the resources given to the teachers and the pupils in terms of buildings looking nice, and physics at Brighton High, and literature, and calculus? How many schools have the opportunity to be good? Latin Academy?
Only one physics teacher, I'm told, in the whole... only one physics trained teacher?
There are schools who don't even have that. How does a parent make a choice?
Charles, what do you think about that?
Well, that's a good point that Gene makes, and my answer to that is our plan gives a public referendum on the schools. A parent can choose 6 schools, and if the Johnson School, I use a name that is generic, is chosen last all of the time, then we know that school either needs to have a new principal, needs to have new resources, needs to have new teachers.
The public referendum exists now. When people fill out their assignment sheet now, they avoid those schools that they perceive are bad. We've had a public referendum. Chuck, we know which schools parents don't want to go to.
I would disagree with you on that. We do not have a public referendum right now on which schools are good and which schools are not bad, because people have not had the choice. You yourself said...
You need to talk to the parents.
Well, you yourself said that people now are geocoded to a school. I know that, you know that.
Folks,
they don't have choice.
Let me interrupt here.
We have provided choice. The only choice you have right now is magnet school.
Charles, hold on here. Let me interrupt for just a second, because I know we're going to get into it, but we have a studio audience here who is willing to challenge some of this as well. So let's start with you on my left. Your name and
My
and where
name
you're
is
from.
Mildred Augustine. I'm the co-chair of the Citywide Parent Council, and I want to know, how does the school assignment guarantee improve education for the kids?
Well, it's very simple. The school assignment guarantees better schools, because if a school is not chosen, then the superintendent knows that he's got to put funds there, or the mayor knows that.
But you all know what school already that people doesn't pick, because there's a lot of them that I don't pick, and I'm not in your
People do
position.
not have the choice of picking schools in Boston right now, and that fact must be put on the table.
Charles, I think what we're saying, hold on a second, hold on. I think what we're saying here, I think what she's trying to say is just because you get the opportunity to pick a school, does that mean that my kid is going to come home, wait a minute, does that mean my kid's going to come home with a book and not with a Xerox pack for a paragraph?
Well, you're making an indictment on Superintendent Wilson schools right now, and Jean and Juanita, they're running these schools now. And one of the things we did in the East Side is we demonstrated that some of the schools there were not good because we drew a zone so people could see that. People were running these schools before we came here.
Let Dr. Wilson get in. Hold on.
The quality of the schools will improve if adequate resources are there.
That's right.
We have right now 39 schools that don't have any money associated with the repair of those buildings. We have a master plan, but there are 39 schools that have no money there. We're going to ask parents to start choosing among poor buildings. We need more supplies, more books, better educational programs. Those do cost dollars.
Okay.
And I
okay,
agree with the
hold on.
superintendent on that.
We need another question. I've got to go on.
Just one thing, please.
It's got to be a comment. Quick.
A comment. On the school assignment last year, I picked a school that I already know about that didn't have quality education for my child. Yet and still, when the assignment came, you all gave my son that school. So what you going to do about that?
That will not happen in our plan.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Your question, please. Go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Sion.
Where are you
I'm a
from?
senior at Bryan High School.
Okay.
Last year, Dr. Wilson, Bryan High School received more awards for writing than any high school in the city. The writing improvement was in large part due to a cooperative effort by many teachers. Why do you want to split up a winning team?
Brighton High School is a very good high school. We have 17 high schools, and our high schools are good high schools. The reason that I'm recommending that we consolidate programs is that we have excess space, tremendous amount of excess space at the high school level. We need to have fewer high schools in order to be able to support quality programs throughout. It's not that we're trying to suggest closing your school or any other because the program is bad.
Okay.
Could I have a comment on this?
Quickly, just add.
One of the problems you have now in Boston, even though you have limited choice, but you have no way really of empowering parents or holding schools accountable to be instructionally effective. Part of the problem with closing a Brighton High School now would be that's probably a school that is attractive to parents. Under our plan, the schools that are not attractive to parents, those are the schools that are going to come under scrutiny, and our plan gives them 2 to 3 years to become attractive or be closed, changed, or merged. That will come with our plan. With the current plan that you have no way of knowing really what schools to close on the basis of whether they're good schools or whether they're bad schools. Our plan will identify to Boston the schools that need the help and the schools that have to undergo significant change.
Let's move on to another question, please. Go on. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Dr. Wilson. My name is Patricia
Step up to the mic.
Solvaro. I am a junior at Bryan High School. Bryan High School is the only neighborhood public school. If your plan of closing Bryan High becomes successful, many students will be traveling long distances. Therefore, we Bryan Austin students will be deprived from having a school which was only 15, 20 minutes away from us. My question is, why are Austin Bryan parents being denied a choice of a public high school in the neighborhood?
Well, I don't want to spend too much on Brighton High School. I think the question is an important one, but in the plan that I'm recommending, we're talking about a citywide high school zone. Our consultants did not give us a high school proposal. They gave us an elementary and middle school proposal. And I think it's unfair to start having high school students at the 9th grade start to select a school if we don't have a chance to focus on high school improvements. So we are suggesting that there be high school improvements as well as the whole notion of consolidating programs to make use of the space in a different manner. I know that there are a lot of concerns about Brighton, but I think the issue of student assignment and the quality of the programs across the entire city has to be a focal point.
I keep feeling inclusion over here. You guys wanted to add to that?
Sure. I think, again, we need to clarify. Parents right now do have limited choice. They do get a listing of those schools they're geocoded to. That is limited choice. The point we're trying to make is parents, when they check off those forms now, avoid the schools that they know and avoid the schools that they perceive are bad.
So in other words,
we know now.
Let me try and understand. Let's try and put this in a nut. What we're saying is that it's almost, you're almost like a consumer now. You go in shopping.
That's right.
You're going shopping for a school. And if the school is bad, if the loaf of bread is bad, certainly the consumer is not going to take it. Is that what we're talking about?
And you know, then you've got to improve that bread.
Does that make sense to you, Gene?
First of all, I think we're talking apples and oranges. This is a major city school system that's
like
under 3 court orders. Allow for bilingual education, special needs, and the court order for desegregation. We're a city that does not have integrated housing, and schools can't do it by themselves without cross-zone, whatever the zones are, transportation. Right now, quality follows class, color, and income. Make no mistake about it. And this city has offered the goodies on the basis of that. A court order that provides equity must have income attached to it. You don't get a Brighton High School or a Latin school or any other good school without equity in staff, in programs, and in building. And when the superintendent puts that forth, he and all of us who don't want to pay any more taxes are under pressure to do a lot with a little bit of money. And make no mistake about it, when you lose your name, Brighton High, Roxbury High School, you lose your place. A school is a placeholder for the institution of community. It's like a swamp or a wetlands. It holds the community together. So when you pull the school out, you're pulling the infrastructure money out. You're saying it doesn't count. So people don't want their schools closed. We didn't want them closed in Roxbury. Our kids will do some serious bus riding out of Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan, and nobody cares about that.
Gene,
but that is the equity that parents know has to be in place because choice is a code word.
Could I make a point there
It avoids equity.
On what Gene has said?
Quickly, very quickly.
Yes,
sir.
it's a very, very quick point, and it is that the issue of resources for enhancing education in Boston is a separate issue from the zones that we have created. And that's where the confusion has come.
I don't think you can separate them. I think you give false hope to parents that they are going to have something fine and appropriate by saying we now have choice.
Yes, Mr. Superintendent, but the mayor is not going to give you a blank check.
If the issue is not combined.
No,
you can't. Let me just finish, Chuck. Let me finish.
Dr. Charles, no blank check?
The issue is, yes, choice, more choice. But the schools have to improve. In order to improve, we have to have more materials. We have to paint up those schools.
But how does that deal with choice?
We have to also improve the educational program.
Could you answer,
Charles? I want Mr. Superintendent to answer me so that the public won't be confused. The choice issue, because I'm in favor of him. I've said publicly that I endorse more resources for the schools. But he's confusing the resource issue with the choice issue.
Let me hold it right here, because hold on, we're not going to get anywhere, and I want to get some more. We're going to go back and forth here, and nobody's going to concede to the other. So let's get some more of the audience said. This young man here on the left-hand side.
My name is Jamal Crawford. I'm a junior at Mario Umana Tech. I live in Roxbury. I don't believe that closing any school for the sake of education is right, because it contradicts itself. But if you do have to close a school, why would you close a school like mine, Umana, and Brighton High, who are excelling academically? It doesn't make sense.
There are 2 high schools in East Boston with the student population that we have throughout the entire city, with 17 high schools. None of the analyses that have been done on the space utilization for high schools in this city over the last several years have indicated anything except 2, 3, or 4 high schools should be closed. No one is recommending that their own high school be closed. That will not happen in Boston. It doesn't happen in any other city. But the fact is we have scarce resources. The high schools are good high schools. And in your particular area of the city where you go to school, 2 high schools are more than enough. We need to have fewer high schools, and we need to be able to consolidate our facilities. 1 citywide zone, I think, would accommodate students from all over the city. So I'm not thinking in terms of high schools in Brighton or high schools in East Boston or high schools in South Boston, thinking about high schools that can service an entire city. And we have 17 of those schools, not associated with one area of the city. We can't provide the quality of education throughout if we keep having our staff and students and materials spread out all over the place.
The consultants do have an idea on high school.
Okay,
if you want better schools, why don't you close the ones that are not achieving?
But may I answer that? May I answer that? As a consultant, we advise the school department not to deal with the high school situation this year because we think the high schools are too important in Boston to be dealt with just with themes. We think that you ought to have a whole semester to study what schools are needed, where they're needed, which schools should be kept open, which schools should not. And we think that the study of high schools right now is incomplete and actually inadequate. And we've advised the school system to do a thorough
We've been studying high schools for 2 years.
But it's inadequate.
We've been studying for 2 years.
How do you then assign ninth graders when you don't even know where they're going to go? You're giving.
Your plan suggests assign. Your plan says assign ninth graders. Now, how can you assign ninth graders?
I didn't say assign. We said let them choose.
Give them choice. Give the parents choice among ninth graders without handling the high schools.
You cannot handle them this year because you don't have a good plan.
Then why submit ninth graders to that process of being selected?
We said ninth graders should be free to choose whatever school they wish to choose. We also said you should go on hold for closing schools. We also said you should commission a panel of individuals to study the needs of high school in the city. You have not done that.
Chuck, we have studied a panel of experts. I'm a panel of experts.
I have
My
read
staff
that
are a
study, and
panel of
that study
experts.
is inadequate.
We have brought people in for several years to study high schools.
It's inadequate.
We don't need another team to come in to study high schools.
Gentlemen, ding, ding. You wanted to get one in. Go ahead.
The students here, like their parents who came and spoke to us at the 3 hearings in the beginning of the public discussion of the consultant's plan and the hearings that were held in Roxbury and Mattapan, all said the same thing. When I pick a school for my child in kindergarten to preschool, I want to know the curriculum road they're going to take from K through 12. And unless you include a citywide high school plan so that the prerequisites to do well at Brighton High School are in place at the middle school and the elementary and the preschool, then we don't have a choice. Choice is a code word right now for not addressing the cost of equity and excellence.
No, that's not, Gene. That's a misstatement. That's a misstatement.
Political reality.
That's ridiculous.
It's part of the Bush administration's way of getting the public's mind on choice instead of equity.
As a public policymaker, you're confusing the public. Choice is not a function of resources. Resources is a function of negotiation between the city and the school department. Choice is a function that the students and the parents make of their own. And you should not hold the parents hostage to not being able to choose simply because they're not enough.
Okay, Dr. Willie, good point made. Let me get another question in from the audience.
Good evening. My name is Andre Chandler, and I'm one of the many concerned students at Brighton High School.
Okay.
Now, my question is directed toward Dr. Wilson. If the new plan is designed to give parental choice and integration, is it necessary to close Brighton High School as well as other high schools?
Well, I think I've tried to indicate that if a recommendation is put forth to close a high school, it's on the...
From Billie Holiday